Waspada.
Halo,
Selamat
hai,
malam.
Horas.
Horas.
Selamat
Horas sudah
malam.
kemarin.
Sudah. Kali ini apa ya? Tetap halo kali ya. Halo, halo, halo.
Sepada.
Sepada.
Sugeng Dalu.
Kita sedang mencari Guten Morgen. Ini
Ah,
sesuai sama eh,
hint.
narasumber kita malam hari ini. Ya, sebelum kita ke narasumber, selamat malam semuanya, teman-teman. Apa kabarnya? Seperti biasa, ketemu lagi dengan Eka, Ivan, dan Riza di acara Ngobrolin
Ngobrolin
Ngobrol,
web.
Ngobrolin Web.
Malam ini kita
Nah,
kedatangan tamu spesial nih.
spesial. Ya, tapi sebelum udah pada tahu namanya kan, tapi kan mungkin ada yang kenal, ada yang belum. Nah, mungkin kita kenalan sedikit masing-masing. Saya Riza, co-founder Activate, sudah merintis Activate 7 tahun. Ivan
Senior engineer di Human Made.
sudah
Sudah, I
berapa
don't
tahun?
know. Sudah. Kalau di Human Made udah baru 2 tahun, tapi kalau
2
engineer-nya
tahun.
sudah belasan tahun.
Oke. Kalau Eka?
Aku web developer di Atma Connect. Udah 5
Mm-mm.
tahun kayaknya ya. Ya
5
sekitaran
tahun.
itulah.
Oke. Nah, bintang tamu kita yang satu ini sudah 15 tahun di Google.
Wow.
15 years at Google. So, please welcome Thomas Steiner. Halo, halo.
Hey,
Hai, halo.
Thomas.
Hello.
Thank you for
To be here.
coming. Thank
Thank
you
you
for
for
Yeah,
joining
joining us.
us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
nice. Okay. Before we chat, we would like to you to introduce short, brief introduction for
Short or
yourself.
long, it's okay.
Okay, I'll take 30 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
hello. To those who don't know me, I'm Thomas Steiner. I'm a developer relations engineer on the Chrome team. I'm Tomayak on most places on the internet, so GitHub, Mastodon, Twitter, or X, sorry, X.
X.
And
X.
I work on what we call Project Fugu, which is about enabling new advanced apps on the web. And more recently, I also was made responsible for WebAssembly. So now I'm dealing with these two big topics. So essentially, my work is allowing people to build amazing app experiences on the web platform.
Nice.
Awesome. So, how long have you been working at Google?
I started as an intern while I was still a student. So this was back in 2005. And then I joined full-time in 2007.
2005? Wow. So it's been 15 years.
18, going on
I
18.
stopped
18.
counting, but it's been a couple of years.
You stop counting. Wow. You jump into different team and different role, right?
Yes, so I started in ads. So my internship project was working on the AdWords API. So this is Google's revenue cow, essentially. So as an intern, I was part of all of the work that enabled PHP developers to run their ads on
PHP.
the AdWords API.
And you are older than Chrome itself.
I'm older than many things and many people.
Yeah, but not older than
Yes,
the Blink engine.
I have fond memories of the Google Chrome comic when it was handed out. I still have a
Ah.
physical paper copy.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I remember.
I have memories of people whispering like, "Hey, after contributing to Firefox, we might do something on our own and so on." So this was very exciting times. I was not part of Chrome at all back then, but yeah, like the rumors and stuff you hear in the company. This is definitely something that I was very excited about. And to be honest, my reaction back then was more like, does this really make sense? Should we not maybe focus more on making Firefox better? But yeah,
Oh,
this is where we are today. Now we
But
have
here we
Chrome,
are.
Firefox.
hindsight.
Other than Google Chrome, what is your favorite web browser?
I use Safari a lot, just on my
Safari?
iPhone, of course, and
Hmm.
it's still like on one of the second desktop browsers that I use, mostly because a lot of other people use it. Every now and then I use Firefox, but I have to say I'm more of a regular Safari user than I'm a Firefox user.
I see.
Oh, okay.
But thanks to Interop project, we are now closer. All the three browsers are closer to bring these
Yeah.
standards.
Oh yes, for sure. I think the big browser war times, they are over. Now everyone is really team web, so we work together on the same platform. We have different opinions sometimes, and that's absolutely fine. But yeah, we are all team web, I would say.
Yep.
Okay. So as Devrel, what is your day-to-day work like?
So as I said, I work on enabling people to build amazing apps on the web, which means it's a mix of everything from standards work to talking to partners to planning for the next conference talk to actually delivering the conference talk or hanging out on a podcast like yours. So talking to developers. A lot of my work is just reading. So I spend a ton of time just reading emails. I'm subscribed to a ton of GitHub repositories to always stay up to date on all the different APIs that we're working on and that other browser vendors are also working on. So I try to keep a universal eye on all the vendors, what they're cooking. And a lot of the work is also just following developers. So a lot of people have blogs even today. Blogging is not dead. So my RSS feed reader each day presents me to with something new and amazing to read. A lot of it developed by GDE experts, by the way. So thank you everyone who is a GDE and who is not a GDE for blogging. You all may be in my reading list. So thank you very much for making my day more interesting each day and help me learn something new each day.
Yeah,
When the
so
last time you write an article, Eka or Ivan?
ah, long time. Last
Long
year
time no.
or something.
Last year? Okay.
I didn't write article, but I do demo. I do demo product. Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
see.
do talks, but now I'm a bit behind with the articles. I submit pull request.
You
Yeah,
can
so
submit.
Tom, you were originally an engineer, right? When you were an intern, or when you started working at Google, you were an engineer or developer, and now you're a DevRel. You spend most of your time reading, like preparing to talk for conference talk. Like, how has it changed for you? Was it a significant change for you, or was it just
So
actually
to
easy?
clarify, I never was what we call in Google a software engineer. So SWE, software engineer, is not a role that I ever had. I was working in different roles. They were everything from technical solutions consultant to customer solutions engineer to developer advocate. And now the latest is developer relations engineer, which is sort of a rebrand of developer advocate and developer programs engineer. So two different roles that we had at Google internally that were combined into one. So developer relations engineer is my current role. And so, of course, at the very beginning, I was building stuff. So I was working on software that people would use. But yeah, now these days, mostly I work a lot on standardization, understanding what developers want, just making sure that the things the engineers and the other standards teams specify work in a sense that developers can make sense of it, that they fulfill the needs of the developer community. So it's a bit of really just mentoring, understanding, consulting with different partners. But then, of course, also you need to actually get your hands dirty. So you need to write some actual applications, sometimes small demos, sometimes actual bigger applications to really understand, does this API fulfill the need of the user? Does this what developers expect to do, and what I as like customer zero, as we keep calling it, think the thing does, and then I provide feedback to the specification authors and tell them, look, this is not working as I would have expected it, and sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes they worked based off different assumptions. Something that caught me as a surprise initially was Chrome engineers typically are not really familiar with JavaScript and web programming in general. So there's some for sure, but it's not a skill that like most, I would say, most Chrome engineers have. So when you look at the code samples they produce, you can typically see C++ patterns that appear in the JavaScript code samples that they send. So a lot of the work also is just simply going through the code samples and seeing, this smells like C++, so maybe let's make this more familiar to how JavaScript developers would do things. So yeah, this is my role in a nutshell, and I've changed a lot throughout the years. But yeah, it's always been a change for the better, I would say.
Yeah,
So Tom,
fascinating. So, like web devs are in this group, web developers and browser devs are in this group, and then you and your
the
team sort of bridge the
the
communication.
enabler. Yeah.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
Tom, you were mentioned that you were right now in Fugu project, right? Like,
Mhm.
so and WebAssembly, you mentioned that. So as my understanding, Fugu is a pufferfish that is lethal and poisonous. So why is Fugu and what is Fugu and why is named Fugu? As my understanding, it's
Web,
a advanced
yeah.
web API experimental, but
The
the
real
audience
name is
might.
Web Capabilities Project, right? And
So
Yeah, so
Project Fugu is the
externally, it's
nickname.
sort of called the Capabilities Project, but yeah, the name Fugu was a code name internally. It was somehow used externally a little bit, and then people liked that name more than the other. And yeah, it sort of started to just take off from there. And now people keep mentioning it as Project Fugu. And the core idea of Project Fugu is allowing you to do things on the web that you could not do before. So it ranged from everything from giving you powerful access to files, for example, to the clipboard, integration in the operating system, so that you could, with your application, be part of the way, for example, Windows applications share data with the rest of the other Windows apps. So using the Web Share API, for example. It started mostly in like desktop, but then we had mobile, of course, and now we had the pandemic, and we had a strong focus on desktop. And in the end, it's about everything. It's not limited to just mobile or not limited to just desktop. There's a bit of everything in Project Fugu. It's always about enabling people to build applications. And when you have an app idea and you start programming, and then you realize, there's this one particular feature that I need, and I can't do it because there's no browser API for doing that. Then this is where the team would come in, and we would think of a way, how can we enable this particular feature on the web? What is required? Is it even possible? Because sometimes people come with the assumption that certain things would be exposed on the web. Like, for example, when we had MacBook Pro. Oh, I forgot which generation, but the one that had the touch
The
bar.
touch bar.
When it was super hot to use the touch bar in the very beginning, when people thought this would change their lives, a lot of people asked, like, hey, it would be great to have web access to this. But then, of course, it's only on one particular device from one particular vendor. It's not something that is a thing on all computers, like a mouse, or at least on most computers, like a mouse or a trackpad or something. So it's a very specific need, which doesn't particularly exclude it from the start, but it makes it a lot harder to say this is something we should build into the web platform, just because it's so specific, and it's not something that would be standardized. So if Microsoft were to build Surface laptops with a touch bar, it would definitely not use the same APIs than the Apple touch bar.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember there was a lengthy Hacker News debates about all the touch bar and web API support stuff. Yeah, but eventually, it didn't go through. Right?
I mean, it was hot for a while, but then people just stopped using it. I never really got into the habit because I use my laptop in clamshell mode, so attached to a proper screen. And like that, I never really worked mobile enough to really get into the habit of using the touch bar. So yeah, I mean, for me personally, it was not a big failure that this was not web exposed. But some people were sad, some people were happy because, yeah, as I said, it's not something that is universally available on all laptops or all desktop computers even.
Okay. I want to highlight one of your statement that said that since pandemic, the usage of desktop or laptop is increasing. compared to mobile one. Is that can you elaborate more, please?
So we definitely have seen this trend where people were moving some of their computing from their mobile devices over to desktop computers just because they were locked at home. They couldn't do like, I don't know, big commutes or something
I
to
see.
work,
Yeah.
or didn't have to. So a lot of the usage of application computing needs shifted from mobile to desktop. I don't have any current numbers, so it might be going down a bit again. But yeah, desktop definitely is a platform where the web has won. So a lot of companies these days, when they think of a desktop app, they don't necessarily think building for macOS or Windows or Linux natively first, but most companies think about how can we use the web or at least web technologies if they build something
Yeah.
like an Electron app
Electron app.
to reach as many users as possible on desktop without having to go through the hurdles of building individual apps for all of these operating systems.
Okay, makes sense. So, do you have any thoughts about your view on mobile app versus web apps, comparing the security capabilities and etc.
So especially in the early days, this was a lot more true than maybe now, but in the early days when Android, for example, but also iOS were very open operating systems, you had an app and it all of a sudden had access to everything. This has been shut down a bit now. So if you install a recent operating system version of macOS, it will have more prompts. Like, for example, when you open a downloads folder, it will ask you, hey, does this application or should this application have access to downloads or to documents or whatever?
Yep.
When it's in the beginning, in the early days, it would have had access to the entire disk space. So there's some sandboxing happening on native platforms. Windows has a lot of prompts now where it asks you, hey, do you really want to do this and that? And the same is true on mobile. In the beginning, there were a lot of permissions that you were just granted for free. Now, even if you have a permission, Android after a while will forget the permission. So if you don't use an app for a while, it will lose, for example, background location access, so that you don't expose your data without really knowing it when you don't use the app. And so I think mobile operating systems are, and desktop as well, are catching up when it comes to security of the web that the web always had. So the web app or web apps always run in a sandbox, which means they don't get for free access to all of the APIs to begin with, but it's on the web, it's a prompting system. So whenever you get access to something or what you want access to something, you need to prompt for access first. So this is true for camera, this is true for microphone, this is true for file system access. There's more niche APIs, like, for example, idle detection that detects if you're using your device right now or not. So all of these are exposed as permissions, and only when the user says yes, then you get access to the feature.
Okay.
Including the file system API, right? So
Correct, yeah. And there we're even more conservative. So right now, file system permissions are not persisted yet, but when you reload an application, you need to confirm again that you actually want to grant this application access to a file that it had previously opened. There's some work
Interesting.
on lifting this a bit, I expect news relatively soon on that, where we will have, for example, vscode.dev, so the VS Code PWA version that could just say, this application, actually, I want to be fine with this app having access
Permanently.
to whatever projects or something, and like that, you don't have to confirm every single time you reload the app that you still want to grant access, because it can be annoying, of course, but then also it can be or is a safety feature. So the way we introduce this, we need to be very careful that we don't open security holes that users are not aware of.
Yeah, and it's this kind of permission, like allow listing, is done based on the origin, right? Origin domain. Like I
Correct,
will,
yeah.
we can let the user choose that they will always allow vscode.dev to access their files without reconfirming each time. But for any other domain, they still have
Correct.
to
Yeah, that's
confirm
absolutely correct.
manually. Yeah, like it's very well thought of. I think,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
I just wondering how this sandbox work with an Electron app that embed the web. Is it still require those kind of thing? Like, I know that Figma on installation it use Electron app. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, if it's an Electron app, does it need to ask for permission every time it use, or you can just embed it into the app itself?
I think the way it's handled in Electron, and I'm not an expert there, but the way I think it works, based on my observation as a user, Electron will take care of the permissions, and the Electron app will then just hook into the operating system. So if you want to
Got
get
it.
access to downloads, VS Code will ask you. So VS Code is an example of an Electron app. So not the PWA, but the Electron version.
app.
It will then ask you, do you want to grant VS Code access to the downloads folder?
I
And then you
see.
can go to your system preferences and revoke this access
So
again
it-
if you want to.
So it's act like it's act that's one layer of thing like the same like
Security
browser.
layer, permission layer. The Electron
Yes.
serves as the permission layer.
I see. To the
Yeah, so
operating
Electron
system.
handles the permissions. Yeah. Mhm.
I see. Okay. Cool.
Okay, I think right now at the current condition in web in general, I think it's exciting for us as web developers because we had a lot of opportunity. We have a lot of capabilities, such as WebAssembly. We had Project Fugu. We can build anything that we want. For example, like Figma, it's not possible before, right? I really like the Photoshop web as well because they are not just using one technology. They're using WebAssembly. They're using web components and bunch of Fugu API. Can you tell a story about that, please?
Yes, Photoshop. This is a great case where a partner, in this case Adobe, has worked together with the Chrome team, and where in the end it's a success story in the sense of not just a product that runs in Chrome, but a product that has helped more APIs to land in other browsers as well. So let me summarize quickly what happened in the case of Adobe. So the way the native Adobe app works is that it has a big swap file where it stores, for example, modifications of files. So when you resize an image, it sort of calculates different sizes. So when you zoom in quickly, it will just use one of the pre-calculated zoom levels instead of dynamically resizing all the time, which makes the zoom experience a lot more fluent. And the way this works on native is that they have a swap file, so a file that is pretty big that they can get random access to. So anywhere in the file they can get access to, and read and write. But on the web, there was no way to do that. So on the web, of course, they can use stuff in memory, but at some point you need to just outsource to the file system because the RAM is just not big enough on most people's computers or even mobile devices. So they approached the Chrome team and said, look, we have this requirement. Is there a way we can start with an API for that? So the use case was there. And then the Chrome team came up with what initially was called Storage Foundation API. So this was an API that addressed the use case, but it had a couple of other shortcomings that were presented to other vendors, that were presented to the developer community. So in the end, they went back to the drawing board, came up with a different API design that was more aligned with what other vendors were thinking and what developers were thinking. So now the product of this is the origin private file system. So a file system that is, as the name suggests, private to the origin. And Agar, you mentioned that. It's a pretty genius model for separating things on the web. So they came up with this model of, let's just have the origin private file system where you can do whatever you want in the OPFS without really accessing other areas of the hard disk. And the way OPFS works is it's a file system that is not really visible to the user, which means some of the guardrails that we have on the web, like for example, safe browsing, don't apply there. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that when people work with a file, that they don't download, for example, a virus, or that the application, when it has access to a file, does not stream the source code of a virus into that file. And the way this is prevented on the open web is we use the safe browsing mechanism, which of course makes this operation very slow. Because these files are not exposed to the regular file system, we work with the OPFS. So anything in there can just be randomly created and written and read, because it's private from the user, so it's not exposed to the user. So this is one of the examples where they work with the Chrome team. The Chrome team worked with other vendors. Now we have the OPFS in all major browsers. So it's in Firefox, it's in Safari, and of course it's in everything that is based on Chromium. And yeah, so by that, we have an application that is now, I think, running in almost all browsers that are modern enough to have these APIs.
Have you tried it? Because I'm not the user of Photoshop. So
I
have you tried
haven't,
the
'cause
web
I
version?
don't have an account.
Yeah, I just
No,
tried
no, I
Figma. I
haven't.
just use Figma, but not the Photoshop one.
So during the testing period, I had a test account. Now we're not working on this with Adobe directly anymore. So I've canceled my test account. But it was
Okay.
super cool to see how over the months, more and more of the features started working in Safari as well. So in the beginning, it was just, completely not working. They blocked it. And then they enabled read mode. And I'm not entirely sure if now they have write mode as well. But you could really see how, as the implementation in Safari progressed, the usability of the app in Safari, for example, also started to be more open.
Okay.
I see.
What
Yeah,
what
so
is the
if
most
those of you,
yeah, Eka,
yeah,
please.
so people, those of you who are watching this, if you're interested, you can check those articles, those URLs to read more details.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
this one and the other one. Yeah. So, Tom, what is your most impressive apps on the web so far that you tried?
So I think Photoshop is definitely one that is very impressive. I'm also very impressed with an app called Photopea, which is sort of the open for free version of Photoshop.
Yeah.
That is, I'm not a power user, but it seems to me like it's almost equally, if not equally, powerful as the original Photoshop. With the big difference that Photopea is built by one person, Ivan from where's he
You?
from? I think Czechia. So just one person who's building all this amazing application, whereas the Adobe Photoshop team, of course, is a team of a lot of engineers. I don't know how many, but definitely a lot more than one person.
I see. Photopea. Yeah, that's one great alternative. And also, there's one alternative for Figma, right? Right after Figma acquired by Adobe, there is one application, the alternative one. It's called
So I was made aware of an app called penpot.app,
Penpot. Yeah.
which is pretty
Penpot.
cool.
Penpot.
It's one of these applications, when you look at them, they run fine in a tab. But if you work with it a bit, you can see there's a lot of potential for actually implementing new Fugu APIs that it didn't implement yet. So if anyone out here is interested in adding some Fugu features to Penpot, I think open an issue, suggest what you want to do, like, for example, proper file system access support. And if they say yes, you can probably just implement it and get it into the tool, because it's fully open source. If you launch the tool and you work with it, you can see that instead of saving, it forces you to download files, which is not really the way most people work with files these days. So what you want to do as a graphics designer, you want to make some changes and then save them, and make some more changes and then save them again. But what you do with Penpot right now is you have to download a copy of the file every single time. So you end up with file 1, file 2, file 3, file 4, and so on in your downloads folder, but not really like a new saved version in the sense of you save the modification right back to the initial file.
Like
This is
Figma
cool.
before they implement the file system API, right?
Well,
This would be
Figma-
one potential API that you could add. You could also work on file handling so that you
File
can
handling.
right-click files or double-click files in the File Explorer and open them with Penpot. I'm not sure about drag and drop, if they have integrated the drag and drop API with the file system access API. So really cool integration as well. It's not a PWA, so it's not really made for installation. It's made for running in a tab. So Penpot, by the way, I'm not affiliated at all with them. I actually learned about them yesterday. But like, this is one of these apps where you can see, oh wow, not everyone has heard of Project Fugu, or maybe not everyone thinks it's useful. So I don't know, maybe it was discussed in the issues, and they just said, no, this is not interesting for us. So I don't really know. So that's why I say, if you're interested in adding Fugu features to Penpot, definitely open an issue first and discuss with the developer team.
Are they using WebAssembly as well?
I don't know what they use. I haven't really looked into it. I was made aware of it yesterday, so I didn't have much
see.
chance to interact with it.
What about Photopea? Are they using WebAssembly?
I don't think they do.
Oh,
They might, but I don't think they do.
I see.
So Photoshop for sure, they do. They have their existing code base from the native application. They have isolated so the core features, the core algorithms, and they have a massive WebAssembly code base that they use on the web as well.
Photopea doesn't use WebAssembly. Well, it's from the Fugu Showcase site. It doesn't state WebAssembly.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
Okay. How do we know that the Penpot one is using what API they are already using in Fugu project, and what API they need to implement?
So if you know where to look, you can just check for the traces. So for example, if they use file handling, there has to be something about file handling in the web app manifest. I think they don't even have a web app manifest.
Yeah,
But yeah, you can see very easily. So
I see.
there's an extension that I've built called How Fugu is the Web that does some of these tests automatically. So when you run it on the app, you can see how many Fugu features it detects. This may not necessarily mean that this is all the Fugu features that an app is using. And yeah, that's it. That's a Chrome extension. But yeah, if you install that, you can see yeah, what detectable Fugu APIs an app is using.
I see. Okay.
I'm about to
Yeah,
mention
and
this.
and in Chrome DevTools,
nice.
maybe other browser DevTools too, like random tip for viewers, we can check whether a page calls or requests was a WebAssembly script, right? So we can check from the network tab.
Yeah.
Yes, you can check that. But then also, it's possible, very few apps do this, but it's possible to base64 encode WebAssembly. So you probably won't detect everything. So there might be a way to do that. But I think in general, yeah, the way I would try it in the network tab, just filter for WebAssembly, and you can see all the requests that an app makes for WASM.
All right. So, about the Google I/O topics now, we move on to the. I really like the demo that Eka or Ivan sent me over the WhatsApp group. There is a Lego uh, demo that you did in Bangalore, right?
Yeah, so Google I/O was different this year. So Google I/O was the main event,
Yeah.
and then we had Google I/O
Google
extended
I/O.
sub-events happening in 4 places. So it was
Not
Miami in
extended.
the US
Connect.
first,
Sorry.
IO
Google
Connect.
I/O Connect, right?
I/O
Yeah,
Connect,
I
yes, I/O Connect,
Yes.
in Miami in the US, and then in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, in Bengaluru in India, and in September we will have the final event in Shanghai, China.
Mm.
We collaborated with Lego, so they allowed us access to the Lego Spike Education Kit. So we show on the demo booth 5 different robots, all created with, yeah, here's the video, all created with Lego. And you can see on this video, this is the obstacle avoiding robot. So it drives around. When it finds an obstacle, it tracks back, chooses a new random direction, and then tries its luck again. And yeah, this was really something that a lot of developers liked. The Fugu APIs that we are showing here are around the hardware APIs. So we have um, we have web serial and web Bluetooth that Lego is using to, you can see here the Chromebooks, to get the code from the laptop onto the models. So they use these 2 APIs to yeah, get the code onto the devices.
Okay.
So there was a when we have this, we talked about this in the previous episodes, and one of the questions was the web compile. So once we created those algorithm on the web app, and it compiles into binary. So
Yeah, to
who
send to the
compiles?
microcontroller stuff.
Yeah, we send it to the microcontroller through web serial or web Bluetooth, right? But the questions from the audience that time was, who compiles the code? Is it the server or is it the browser?
So in the case of Lego, they use WebAssembly to run MicroPython. So they compile to MicroPython in the browser and then send it over to the model. And on the model, they have a MicroPython interpreter that would then run the code.
That is the
Mystery
answer.
solve.
Mystery solve.
If I understood
We
correctly, absolutely. So it's of
We
course
tried.
closed source. For the definitive answer, check back with someone from Lego. If you scroll up all the way to the top of this article, you can see the second author should be Jacob, and I think there's a way to contact Jacob.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
but unfortunately, the app is not open source, right? It's proprietary product of Lego, right?
Correct.
The web app.
You can use it, so you can just go to spike.legoeducation.com, but you need to have the Lego kit for it to actually make sense.
I'm
But
going to buy
if you
this.
wanted to just drive program, you could definitely do that.
Yeah, but so I'm curious about the Lego itself. Like it's basically a microcontroller with sensor, right? Either sensor, motion sensor, or maybe light sensor. So basically, if someone wanted to develop an open source version using, say, Arduino and sensors and connect it to their own web app with serial or USB, it would be possible to do that, right?
It would be absolutely possible. The added value of Lego is, of course, the brand plus the build quality. So at the event, we had several
Yeah,
people,
sure.
because the robots were running around on the floor. We had several people step on them, and nothing broke. So if you
Oh,
do something
wow.
like this with an Arduino, you need to, I don't know, build a really good case that it doesn't break. But yeah, for Lego, yeah, it's very stable, made for kids. And yeah, the cables are well isolated and so on, so they don't come off easily. So there's a lot of just experience that Lego has put into this. And of course, also a lot of the value is the instructions. So if you go to the app, you can see build instructions. And there's a lot of thinking that went into how can we illustrate the working of certain sensors with a very motivating examples. For kids, there's a
Yeah.
lot of just way and fun way to explore these APIs and these features, these sensors. That, yeah, as an open source project, you could of course do, but yeah, you have to have a lot of imagination, need to use a lot of creativity to create something like this.
I remember that I had this well, when I went to college, one of the study that I did is to code the microcontroller, but not with drag and drop. It's just with all the codes and in Visual Basic, and compile and send it to the this
Device?
microcontroller and run it like Pathfinder, just the way that you do. But now with Lego, it's just drag and drop. It's like way simpler than
Oh,
those,
but-
Yeah, so
those
they
days.
use Scratch on the MLT. So if you know Scratch, their interface looks
Scratch,
very
yeah.
familiar. So it's based on Scratch, but the way Scratch is licensed is that you don't have to open source your derivative of Scratch. It's very permissive in the sense that you can build on top of Scratch.
I see.
Yeah, but that Lego app is also interesting, the Lego web app, because I saw in the article that you could either use the drag and drop UI, the Scratch-like version, or for more advanced students, you can also write Python directly. So the Python code would also be compiled by the WebAssembly script, right?
So that's correct. For advanced students, you can write MicroPython. So there's some limitations, not the full Python, but MicroPython. But yeah, it's very, very similar to actual Python if you stay within the constraints of what you can do. It's used in university context, for example, to teach the basics of machine learning in some universities. So it's pretty cool. So you see these adults playing with Lego, it's of course very motivating if you can see directly how a reinforcement learning algorithm behaves when you see a robot that walks around and stays on a straight line instead of losing track, because your algorithm is right, so you can directly see the result of what you do. So I wish when I was a student in university we had sorry, I'm messing up my English. We had access to something like this, but we didn't.
Cool. Nah, yeah, this is fascinating. Like, so is the Bluetooth result of the Fugu project or the web serial? Is it come from Fugu project, or is it been there for a while in the web standard, the web Bluetooth and web serial API?
So web Bluetooth and web USB are pretty old by now. So I think they were created in 2015. Web Serial, Web Hit, and so on, they are a lot younger. They were created a couple of years ago only. I think the youngest of them is Web Serial.
Okay.
We also have Web NFC if you want to get access to NFC stickers or just NFC cards or devices. You can also do that on the web now. So it's pretty
That
cool.
means you can read and write NFC with the app?
Correct. You can read and write. Yeah. If you have a mobile device, you can, for example, walk around in a museum, and if there are NFC stickers, you can hold your device. Oops, where's the camera? Here. You can hold your device against the sticker, and then read the sticker, and then you can make NFC writable, so you can write to it if you want to. But this needs to be enabled, so you can't just overwrite the museum stickers with something else. But if you want to, the possibility is there. You can grant access to
Nice.
write.
Yeah, we can make NFC business card or something. If someone asks for our contact, rather than type it, you can just ask to tap.
Yeah, so you could
Nice.
imagine, I don't know, if you want to prove that someone was here, you can ask them, hey, go to this place and then write your whatever signature onto this NFC sticker. So this would be a way how you could imagine this API to be used.
Yeah, but it's unfortunately still Chromium only, right?
NFC, yeah, this is Chromium only. So from the hardware APIs, the one example that is universally supported, not universally. The one example that is supported on more browsers is Web MIDI, which is it predates even Web USB and Web Bluetooth to get access to MIDI devices. And the way Firefox supports this now is through an ad hoc extension mechanism. So because they've done this for the first time with Web MIDI, a lot of developers hope that Firefox will take this, or Mozilla will take this way of enabling powerful features and apply it to other APIs like Web Serial, for example.
Okay. Regarding that, there is one question that audience had is very good. So Adib said that the web API that shipped to Chrome is too fast, too many. Does this mean that the polyfill will always available for the non-support browser?
So some features are polyfillable, but a lot of Google features are not polyfillable, which means if you need, for example, access to web Bluetooth, and there's no way that you can polyfill Bluetooth support
Yeah.
with just JavaScript, then you're out of the game. There's just no way around it. One way to deal with this would be use a special browser. So there's, for example, for iOS, there's a browser called, I think, Bluefy, that allows you to get access to the Web Bluetooth API, but it's just a
wow.
separate browser. So they use a web view for browsing, and then they use a native Bluetooth module for getting access to Bluetooth, and then they just bridge from WebView to native Bluetooth via some sort of bridging technology, and expose that as a JavaScript API. So this is one way
clever, but
how on iOS
brilliant.
you could work with that.
It's complicated.
Yeah, because
complicated.
even Chrome on iOS is use WebKit, right?
Yeah.
Correct. So that's for the moment still the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. There is one question, but in bahasa Indonesia, would someone can do the translation, please?
Nowadays life, people are getting more mobile. I think it means mobility, like people have a more mobile lifestyle. And how much does it affect the ecosystem of mobile apps and web apps? How much does people's mobility affect the ecosystem of native and web apps?
It's an open-ended question, so let me give an open-ended answer. And I want to start with desktop, because on desktop, I would say web has won, just because on desktop, people have the freedom to install any browser that they like. Desktop computers are powerful enough in general, they have enough RAM in general to run most of the apps that people build. So if you move to mobile, this means you deal with different devices. You deal with anything from low-power Android devices to high-end iOS devices. Even on the lowest-end Android device, you can still install other browsers than the one that is shipped originally. So there's browser choice. On the high-end iPhones, of course, you can install different browsers, but because of the way this currently still works is you have to use the Safari engine, so WebKit internally. So you don't get access to a lot of the APIs that browser vendors like Chrome have specified in between. So yeah, I think you need to figure out very carefully what is your target audience if you build a mobile app. Is the way it can work on all the platforms, ranging from low-end Android devices. There are high-end Android devices, of course, as well. But typically, you can go lower end on Android than you can on iOS compared to processing power and also RAM. So yeah, can your application need be fulfilled on these different variants of browsers?
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So in some Indonesian people, we are not using Google anymore for searching. Sometimes we use Google Play for searching for the apps. Is that behavior also happen in, for example, in Germany
Internationally?
or in another country?
I think the underlying explanation is because people are not aware about browsers, URLs, like the general public, non-techie people. They don't understand browsers, opening URL, but they understand about getting an app. So is it a common occurrence elsewhere?
I think we have educated people to search for apps in stores, and Google Play is one of the stores that exist. There's others. There's F-Droid, like an open source Android or kind of more open Android store. There's the Apple Store, the App Store. So we have trained people to look in stores for apps. I think it's different still, mobile versus desktop. On desktop, Windows is very strongly trying to establish the Microsoft Store and very welcoming of PWAs in the Microsoft Store. But then, yeah, when it comes to mobile, I think most people really use something like the Play Store, the App Store to find new apps. I think there's a huge potential for unlocking search, so web search, be it Google, be it Bing, whatever, any kind of web search experience to help people find new apps and install new apps. Actually, Edge, when was it? Yesterday or the day before yesterday, they released an explainer called the Web Install Web Install API Explainer, I think, on the Edge explainers repository, where essentially the idea is if there were a way for web applications to say, I want to be installable from a PWA store, so something like a directory on the web, this API would allow them to do that. And you can think this even further. You don't even need such a directory because if the search engine that people use directly embeds an install button, you can go one step further. So this is an API that is very interesting in this context, where the idea would be really, let's highlight somehow web app experiences that really work for users and that, can be just installed and made run with low friction without going through a store, without downloading, just directly from a search engine results page or from a PWA directory. So there's some thinking in this direction.
All right. Now, one last questions about WebAssembly. So, if we use like WebAssembly, in the WebAssembly there is a request response to make, for example, for to the REST API. So, is that process going to be inside the WebAssembly or in the JavaScript side? For
By the
example,
web. By the
yeah,
web.
yeah, by the web. For example, maybe the WebAssembly use like WebSocket. Is that process will be in the JavaScript side or in the WebAssembly side?
I think it's not possible to use WebSockets from WebAssembly today. I might be wrong, but I don't think there is a way today. But you can definitely use JavaScript to make the the WebSocket connection, and then bridge it down into the WebAssembly world. There might be a way to do that with modern APIs where you can call essentially from the WebAssembly module into JavaScript and then do it there. So technically, you would still do it in JavaScript, but at the WebAssembly level. I think to discuss what is the right approach, and maybe even there's a different protocol, so not web sockets, but maybe web transport. That will be the more modern version of this kind of UDP protocol. There might be a more addressable way for this particular use case. But yeah, without knowing the details, it's hard to make a recommendation there.
I think the question was like how WebAssembly connect to the REST API server, for example. Is it through JavaScript or through the
Go
code
back to
or
the JavaScript
through
thread or
its own thread?
separately.
Yeah, to its own process
So
inside
it's probably
the
on the
WebAssembly.
JavaScript level.
Okay, so
Because at the same time, you still, of course, even if you run in WebAssembly, you still need to respect the same origin policy. So you can't just overcome the same origin policy by using WebAssembly, for example.
I see. So it's still binding to the JavaScript to do the request and get the data and process it. Got it. Yeah.
All right. We are about to wrap up this session. Before that, I would like to ask Tom one last question. What is the most exciting Fugu API in the future? That
In your
The
opinion.
right
upcoming
now,
one.
yeah, right now in
The upcoming
progress. Yeah, upcoming,
Oh, so upcoming ones. That's
upcoming.
interesting.
Yeah.
So upcoming ones, there's a lot of things in the pipeline. There's
Wow.
a lot of things that we work on improving. So something I am excited about, and that would address a lot of Electron use cases, on Mac at least, would be to have some sort of app menu API. So on Mac,
App menu.
the user paradigm is for apps when you install them that they run the menu bar at the top of the screen and not inside of the window. This is of course very Mac specific. UI paradigms and UX paradigms that you need to adhere to. So back to the initial touch bar discussion, this is not something that probably Windows users would be very interested in. At the same time, with macOS Sonoma making apps, web apps possible now, it might be a thing that more vendors are interested in. So in this case, it would be Mac-specific behavior that would be supported or maybe supported. So don't get your hopes up too high yet. But there would be an interest maybe from different vendors. So this could be an interesting API to enable on the web so that you could get access to the top level app menu and like that really truly integrate in the operating system.
Okay. So if people want to know about the upcoming API, you can go to Fugu Tracker web app.
App.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and search for
Fugu-tracker.web.app. All right.
Yeah.
search for the API you want to see.
Yeah, so here,
Yeah.
I think if you search for app menu, you should find it. So the one that I just
Menu.
mentioned.
It's the blue one. See the blue menu.
Where? Oh yeah. This
Yeah.
one.
App menu. Yeah, it's already highlighted because it has the hash.
Oh,
Hashtag.
yeah, hashtag. Yeah. Nice, very nice. Okay, Tom. Maybe we can wrap
Any
up this. This episode.
Anything else you want to
coming.
share?
Yeah.
any
anything
last
else you want?
thing
Last
before we part?
last message?
Last things. Yeah, absolutely. Please try the Fugu APIs. If you have an app idea, build on the web, use the web APIs that are out there. If you have something that is working and running and you think is worthwhile for other people to try out, go to the Fugu API showcase and submit your application. So we are very happily showing all these cool apps that people build with Fugu APIs. So if you go to the Fugu showcase, on the top there's a little submit new app or so button that you press, and then you land on a Google form and you submit that. And then after a couple of hours or maybe a day or two, it will show up in the Fugu showcase, and you can expose your app to a lot more people and users, and like that, get maybe more interest in people who use your API and your app.
Yeah, you can see the use case as well. Yeah, if you want to build a new app, is that possible to use the web platform or
Yeah,
not?
if you're searching for inspiration for projects, you're bored with to-do lists and Hacker News clones, you can find inspiration to use new APIs there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Nice. Okay, Tom. Thank you for coming.
Okay. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much.
Thank you
It's
very
very
much for having me.
insightful. And
Yeah.
looking
And
forward
thanks
to
for
meet you
chat
in
for the
person.
viewers who hang out with us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again.
Oke,
Yeah,
sekian dari
bye.
kita. Thank you very much for the time. Thank you very much for the questions and discussion. We see you all next week in Tuesday as well. As
We
usual.
will be back
Thank
to
you.
speak Indonesian again.
Yes, at 8 p.m. See you next week. Bye bye.